Have you ever walked into a room expecting an ordinary evening, only to realize that one unexpected moment could change the rest of your life? Sometimes kindness doesn't arrive with applause or grand speeches. Sometimes it quietly takes a seat across the table, waits for the truth, and reminds us that the people who deserve a second chance are often the ones who never stop doing the right thing. Tonight's story is about a single father, a blind date, and a surprise that no one at the restaurant could have predicted. Before we begin, if stories about hope, compassion, and real human kindness inspire you, make sure to subscribe to Spread Kindness, like this video, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what kindness means to you. Your support helps us share more heartwarming stories that remind the world that kindness still matters. David Parker had been raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, alone ever since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Every morning began before sunrise. He packed Lily's lunch, braided her hair the best he could, dropped her off at school, and then rushed to work at a marketing company in downtown Chicago. Life wasn't easy. Bills seemed to arrive faster than paychecks, and sleep had become a luxury David barely remembered. Yet no matter how difficult life became, he always smiled at strangers, helped coworkers when they struggled, and treated everyone with respect. His best friend, Sarah, had watched him carry the weight of the world on his shoulders for years. "You deserve to be happy again," she told him one afternoon. David laughed. "I barely have time to grocery shop. How am I supposed to date?" Sarah smiled. "I've already solved that problem." David looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I set you up on a blind date." David nearly dropped his coffee. "You did what?" "Just trust me," Sarah said. "Her name is Emily. She's kind, funny, and she knows you're a single dad." David hesitated for days before finally agreeing. On Friday evening, he tucked Lily into bed at his neighbor's apartment, thanked her for babysitting, straightened his only nice jacket, and drove to a small Italian restaurant. His hands were sweating as he walked inside. Emily was already waiting. She stood as he approached, smiling warmly. "You must be David. And you must be Emily." The conversation felt surprisingly easy. Emily worked as a pediatric nurse. She loved reading, volunteering at children's hospitals, and laughing at terrible dad jokes. David couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed so much. For the first time in years, life felt hopeful. Then everything changed. A familiar voice interrupted them. "Mind if I join you?" David slowly looked up. His stomach dropped. Standing beside the table was his boss, Richard Collins. Richard was known throughout the company for being demanding, intimidating, and impossible to impress. David immediately stood. "Mr. Collins. I didn't know you were here." Richard smiled. "I wasn't planning to be." Then he looked at Emily. "Dad, you made it." David froze. Emily smiled awkwardly. "I'm sorry. I probably should explain." Richard pulled out a chair and sat down. Emily looked at David with an embarrassed smile. "Richard Collins is my father." David felt every hopeful feeling disappear. He assumed the evening was over. His boss had never shown much warmth at work. David expected questions about deadlines, performance reports, or why he wasn't answering emails after business hours. Instead, Richard quietly asked the waiter for another menu. For several uncomfortable minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Richard looked directly at David. "My daughter tells me you're raising your little girl alone." David nodded. "Yes, sir." Richard remained silent. Then Emily gently touched her father's arm. "Dad, tell him." Richard sighed deeply. "I owe you an apology." David blinked. "I don't understand." Richard looked down at the table. "Last month, I saw you leaving early several times." David nodded nervously. "Lily had doctor's appointments. I assumed you weren't committed to your job." David didn't know what to say. Richard continued. I almost fired you. David's heart pounded. But then something happened. Richard explained that one evening he had driven past a community center after work. Inside, he saw David serving meals to homeless families with Lily beside him. Neither of them knew anyone was watching. After serving food, David stayed behind cleaning tables while Lily handed out homemade drawings to children. Richard had remained in his car for nearly 20 minutes, watching quietly. No cameras, Richard said softly. No social media. No recognition. You were simply helping people. David shrugged. My daughter asked if we could volunteer. I couldn't say no. Richard smiled sadly. My wife passed away when Emily was 12. Emily reached over and held her father's hand. I buried myself in work because I didn't know how to be both a father and a businessman. He looked into David's eyes. When I saw you with Lily, I realized you've been doing something I never managed. David didn't expect those words. Neither did Emily. Richard continued. I've spent years measuring employees by numbers. But kindness isn't measured on spreadsheets. The waiter arrived with dinner. The atmosphere slowly changed. Instead of discussing business, they talked about family, loss, hope, and second chances. Emily shared funny stories from the children's hospital. David spoke proudly about Lily's dream of becoming a teacher. Richard listened more than he talked. For the first time in years, father and daughter seemed to understand each other better. At the end of dinner, Richard quietly handed David an envelope. David looked confused. What's this? Open it tomorrow. The next morning, David carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. It announced his promotion to team manager. His salary would increase enough to finally move Lily into a safer neighborhood. There was another note attached. It simply read. You reminded me that success means nothing if kindness is missing. Thank you for teaching me something my own employees never could. David sat silently for several minutes before tears filled his eyes. That afternoon, he picked Lily up from school. We're moving, she asked excitedly. Yes. Did something amazing happen? David smiled. Someone chose kindness. Months passed. David and Emily continued seeing each other. Lily adored Emily from the very beginning. Richard also changed. Employees noticed he started asking about their families instead of only their deadlines. He introduced flexible schedules for parents. He expanded volunteer programs throughout the company. Even people who had once feared him began respecting him for entirely different reasons. One small act of kindness had quietly transformed an entire workplace. On the anniversary of that unforgettable dinner, Richard invited the whole office to volunteer together at the same community center where he had first seen David. As families served meals side by side, Richard stood beside David. You know, he said with a smile, I thought I came to surprise your date. David laughed. But I was the one whose life changed. David looked across the room at Emily helping children decorate cookies while Lily laughed beside her. He realized kindness had brought every one of them together in ways none of them could have planned. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes a blind date becomes the beginning of a family. Sometimes a difficult boss becomes a lifelong friend. And sometimes the smallest acts of compassion create the biggest changes in someone's heart. If this story reminded you that kindness can transform lives in ways we never imagine, remember to share it with someone who needs hope today. A single kind choice can begin a chain of blessings that reaches far beyond what we can see. Until next time, keep believing in people, keep choosing compassion, and never stop spreading kindness.